in the morning now, as things are changing vastly in my world. I have a lot of stuff happening in my life right now. Lots of changes, transformations, all good stuff. But going back to the old way of Natalie, where I get like 50 billion things done starting at 4:30, and then trying to relax at the end of the day by working out. It's going to be a crazy roller coaster ride, but I'm in for it. I signed up for it. I'm excited about it. Just started my master's program, which is a master's program in consciousness, and a master's program in consciousness and transformative studies. And I did my first lecture this morning, which I'm super excited about, with talking about paradigms of consciousness, which is really cool, actually. The topic breaking down the different paradigms, and sort of the bigger worldviews that people experience spirituality through, which is awesome because the courses themselves lend to help support some of the worldviews that the listeners have, and maybe will allow me to communicate a little bit more with people with different worldviews or understandings of consciousness and how that works out for them. So I'm, again, super excited to get started, super excited to see. Get ready early in the morning. What's, how this is going to transpire and how things are going to come about. I'm already tired though, super sleepy already. I have a lot to move through today, but that's okay. I'll get through it. So there you go. Good morning, Roberto. Good morning, Curtis. Looks like Curtis is watching. I'm not sure if he's still watching. Okay, so let's get started. The paradigms of consciousness I wanted to talk about, which is sort of what I talk about already, which is the sacred feminine, sacred masculine, and how the two intertwine and how they did it. So in the learnings or teachings that I was lecture I was listening to today, was talking about the different paradigms, one being idealism, one being materialism, one being pan something ism. And I actually, let me see, I have the notes that I took. This will actually help me just to give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about now. Materialism being that material arises and out of the material comes consciousness, and he talked about why that doesn't really work as much. And idealism either, saying that consciousness happens and then material arises from consciousness, and talked about why that really doesn't work. But the last paradigm he talked about, which sort of makes sense, is the all-encompassing of which you have, the dualism is what he talked about. And dualism was a good one too, but still feel like it doesn't fully describe the phenomena that we see around us in consciousness itself and how we are able to experience what is happening. And so the last one is that everything has consciousness, like every cell. And the way that he described it, and the way that I like it and the understanding of it, is that each individual part has consciousness, but it's an innate object. So let's just say like this cup, right? That this cup itself has consciousness. Now, not consciousness in the way that we understand consciousness of like being able to see things and communicate to one another, but that every cell in this cup has some sort of consciousness within it, and that because it was materialized not by natural selection or the way that things evolved, but because we created it, that the interconnection or the relation between the particles doesn't exist. So they have their own singularity consciousness. I think I'm saying that right. So in other words, consciousness is all around us, and it doesn't and then because of that everything is interconnected, and because everything is interconnected and we have materialism, or we have the bridging gap between materialism and idealism, sort of, which I call the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, is the way I understand it. Idealism being the sacred feminine, materialism being the sacred masculine. And neither one of them communicate to each other, which is why I believe they don't work together. Dualism indicates that they're both happening but separate, and they don't intermingle with each other. So when you bridge together, they are called, and I think the worldview Let me see what it's called. And I can't wait to get further into this particular worldview, just to kind of pick it apart and look at it, to see what the truth is behind it. For me, my experience of it is panphysicism, something like that. And that's all encompassing. So again, super excited to get started with this program. And I'm excited to be on super early as well on Spirit and Coffee with you guys. So hopefully get some of the early birds again, although it's like 7:30, but I think in the future I'll be doing more like a 6:30 start time, because probably will get into my lectures after I do Spirit and Coffee rather than before, depending on what my brain says. So excited. Also starting my job and all these other things. So I'm going to be a busy woman, and it's going to be a lot of fun things happening and on the rise. Also fun for you guys, because you get to see me probably go through the craziness of what that looks like in my life at this point. Oh, funny. Okay. So talking about that on this Monday, it's understanding how those particular worldviews or paradigms work for you, like the belief systems, the structures, why we do things we do, why do we behave the way we behave, why do we believe the things that we believe, what's having us understand life through the lens that we're trying to understand it through, what is it that's showing up in our world and causing us to have the impact that it does on us. And it's really a worldview. It's really the way we see the world. It's how we're looking at things. And I think that this particular understanding would be really helpful when we start to look at it, especially if we're in the work, because worldviews sometimes clash. Sometimes people have different worldviews. A big one is like religion, right? Worldviews on religion and people having their own understanding of what that means. Worldviews on, family, worldviews on, maybe how finances, just different worldviews all around and how they work. So understanding what lens you're looking from is important. He did mention something in my course that, it's like meeting people where they're at in terms of their worldview and being able to communicate with people through their worldview. And I started thinking about this because I'm having difficulty at this point trying to communicate. It's been very complex, not easy, difficult thing to do. Especially coming from the worldview that I have. So trying to meet people in their worldview becomes a very complex thing, as well as them trying to communicate to my worldview, pretty complex, right? So just understanding how to communicate through the lens of a paradigm or a worldview becomes super it just becomes really complicated and hard at times. But I'm excited to see what the different paradigms are that our professor is going to want us to be living into, and see how that relates to our life and how we engage it. Good morning, Mama. You want to say good morning? You want to come say hi? I don't know if anybody's on here because I'm doing it so early now.
Good morning. Have a good day.
Yay. Okay, my little mama, she's so cute. So again, understanding how to communicate and the dynamics of the worldview and how we engage in that. Super critical, super hard, not easy. I feel like there's times where I'm like, if I could just put you in my body, in my eyes, I think you would understand what's going on. Of course, that's not possible. And so it just becomes very complex. I'm sure that people feel the same way in all their relationships, right? Like if you could just understand what I'm trying to tell you, or see it the way that I'm seeing it. Right? And then on the other spectrum, it's like, well, can you see it the way I'm seeing it? And it's like, yeah, not really. And it's really hard. But Was super helpful to listen to that lecture this morning, especially where my life is going, because I do have a lot of moving parts now, and there is a whole lot of responsibility that I'm stepping into. And because I value my education, and I value the things that I'm up to, I give 120 billion% into it, and I focus very diligently. And that's part of the reason why there's results that happen, right? Because you have to be able to focus, hone in, and actually be a driver of the work. No one's going to drive your life but you. You guys know that. People can't drive your life for you. You've got to drive it for yourself. And so you get to be the creator of the world that you choose to see around you, or whatever you get to create or want to create. And how you create that becomes your, becomes your whole thing. So again, it's kind of taking that personal responsibility for what you get to see, like be the change you want to see. What does that even mean? Who do I get to be? Who do I get to show up as in order to create the things that I'm choosing to create in my life? And so it's exciting. I have a couple of projects that I'm really going to be excited about. Maybe I'll share them with you. Good morning, Eddie. And they're going to be, good morning, Shershi, Shershi, I'm not sure, Shershi. Is that how you say it? I'm sorry if I'm saying that. Sarush. Got it. Cheers to you guys on Podbean that just got on. Are you good? You are good. Thank you. So understanding that, and then how we engage those worldviews is really important. So it allows us, when we allow ourselves to enter into other worldviews or other paradigms and different lenses, we're able to sort of reconcile maybe things that are conflict, I guess. When conflict arises, we're able to kind of reconciliate that through the lens of seeing it from somebody else's point of view, which is not, it's not always easy to do that, especially if you're in the murk of your own mind or the murk of your own suffering. It's hard to get out of that, to be able to see. So untangling that, and that's something. So for me, I was like, I'm gonna need I need coaching, I need support, I need to understand how to engage individuals, and what's really coming up for me at this point, because so much is changing, so much the paradigm is shifting right now. We see huge polarities happening, us versus them. There's a lot going on right now, and in that, it's in order to overcome within yourself those little arguments that show up, or conflicts that show up. It's really to try to understand maybe someone who's in opposition of where you are. Again, it's not easy, and sometimes it's draining, but it's up to you if you choose to or not, because you don't have to, right? You get to if you choose, but again, it's not easy and can be super draining. That's how I feel. I feel drained. So trying to move through that, right? And then understand how my own particular construct and understanding of the world impacts others, right? So there's like a two-pronged process there. It's the draining from my own mental process of trying to how to engage, and then the draining of not being able to communicate or articulate or express what worldview I'm coming from, and then trying to understand the other person's worldview. So there's probably three things happening, probably more than that, but I would say three things, which become very draining and life-sucking. And but I encourage you to try it and see what happens for you. So if you're having conflict basically within your life at this point, if there's some conflict that you're trying to resolve, be it wherever that is, if you guys want to share, you're more than welcome to, is, looking and recognizing the conflict and asking yourself, how do I sort of see, it's like saying, how do I see the way they're looking at it or their perspective? You know, what is it that they're experiencing? Trying to put on, how they always say, you couldn't walk a mile in my shoes, because your shoes are what? They're fit for you. Sort of the same thing, right? It's like, if I walked a mile in somebody else's shoes, what would that be? Maybe you have some clarity about the way that they engage the world. Or maybe not, I don't know. But being part of the work, and it's not easy. None of it's easy. I'm going crazy. Trying to figure this out. So as we continue down this route, which I'm again super excited about, would be to do continue to do the readings, maybe some of the readings that I have in my classes, perhaps some engagement about what that means, and how it relates to you in your life, and actually you creating and co-creating with existence, and how you can actually support yourself into the creation of your divine birthright, because again, that's what this is about. How do you create? So I would highly encourage you today, if there's conflict somewhere, to ask yourself how to see the world through that person's lens. And do you want to see yourself through that person's lens? And when you see yourself in that person's lens, what kind of feelings, sensations, and emotions arise out of that? What are you making right or wrong about it? What are you judging about it? What are you... so it's just asking those bigger questions as you allow yourself to see yourself in their shoes, or through their lens, or through their eyes, right? And understanding why they may actually behave the way that they behave. Good morning, Wealth. How are you? Okay. So, there you go. I'm tired, you guys. So I'm sorry if I'm a little bit slower than normal. Um, oh, your little icon has a little, what is that? A burning something? Hey, Ralph. How's the coffee? The coffee is, it's sweet and yummy. So cheers. It was made by somebody else, so super grateful for that. Gratitude to the also a shout out to the to Curtis for setting all this stuff up, and doing the production part of this whole thing, because it's changed. I like on the Podbean itself is rough weekend. Yeah, for me, for Natalie, rough weekend. No, it was actually a really good weekend. It's becoming a rough week to start. Which is not good, because I have a lot of stuff I have to get done, and I have little mental capacity for anything that throws me off. So I guess I gotta find my balance. Maybe make a big firm foundation. Maybe my foundation is not strong enough. And so I'm teetering off the edge. So I got to get my personal foundation set up again. But thanks for that question, because actually facilitated something in my mind that made me think, oh, you know what? My own personal foundation is probably not structured the way that it should be, in order for me to not feel like I'm going to fall off the ledge, because that's kind of how I feel. Like I feel like I'm like trying to balance on a tiny little wire, like a like a dental floss wire. And one misstep, I'm gonna fall over. Anywho, so yeah, thank you for asking that question. So restructuring and resetting the foundations of my life, and I love to be. I'm an action oriented person, so I love to be in action. So I'm really excited about all the action that's going to happen in my life. And excited for what it's going to allow me to create and the space and that it's going to allow me to create from. So, just as you start to create stuff, like as you start to open up your creative space, things start to become available to you, right? You start to see the shift in your life happen, and as that happens, right, more things and resources start to show up, which is really cool. So for me, I'm just looking to expand upon, okay? And as I expand, right, then I'm able to create even more, and the capacity gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And because the capacity is bigger, there's more space to create, more space to materialize and magnify divine birthright over and over and over again. So I'm excited that there's a shift. And also being in action builds up the momentum so that you're able to take on more or do more. So the momentum is super critical. And you guys know this. Like once you get started and you start moving in a direction, you start to build up the momentum, the speed. And then once you have that speed and momentum, then you can really do a push. And then you have what you've created is actually magnified even bigger. So that spiral. So that's what I'm up to. A lot about what I'm up to today. And hopefully the lesson that I gave you, I think it's going to help me at least with my program, that information hopefully supports you in some way of understanding how consciousness has, different ways of, or different worldviews structurally, our paradigms, or whatever you want to call them. So in the construct of what we call consciousness arises, I believe, I don't know if that's the right terminology, these ideas, right? And how we engage consciousness, and what does it even mean, and how do we even come to understand it. So it's a philosophical type of understanding, and we can also make it scientific if we choose. They try to, but that doesn't seem to work. But we can also make it very idealistic or materialistic, whatever we choose. But I will say that we cannot deny that neither one exists, because they both do. So it's just trying to understand how they exist in the same capacity together. Or are they two separate things? But that doesn't even make sense, right? How could it make sense that it's two separate things? It doesn't to me, in my worldview, my paradigm, my way of thinking, my way of understanding and engaging the world. Because as we go through the world, experiences arise within us, and we're able to gauge them and give some opinion about it. And as we give an opinion about it, we're saying that our consciousness is there so that we can discern between this and that. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but we're able to make a distinction, like a clear distinction between things. And so because of that, I would say you can't have one without the other. They coexist in some way. It's just reconciling the coexistence. Like, what does that mean? How does that come together? And I have tons of worldviews about it, of course. Like the worldview or paradigm around why. And then it's built up over time. So think about that today. Think about your worldview. Think about what's shaping you. Think about the conflict resolution that may come from trying to see your worldview through a different worldview, or through someone else's eyes, or even asking them how they've come about that. So, this morning I heard somebody else's worldview about relationship, and I just listened and heard it and said, okay, that's their worldview. Doesn't mean it's mine, because that's not my experience, but it's okay. Doesn't make that right, wrong, good, or bad. It just means that that's their lens through which they see life. And then you have your lens through which you see life. And in those lenses, can you at least have the decency to listen to somebody else's way of perceiving life? Doesn't mean you have to take it on. You don't. But you can at least listen and observe and say, okay. And that at least lends for some understanding mentally. Now, I'm not saying that that resolves conflict, but I am saying that it can support you in at least having some understanding of how the person sees the world. Because we can't fully ever, right, unless someone tells us, but we'll never truly understand how they see the world because they've been shaped differently. And you guys know that. So hopefully that's helpful today. I think I'll be better tomorrow as I get rest. I probably got all of, I don't know, maybe 3 hours, 4 hours of sleep or something. So I'm super sleepy. So I'm a little bit off my game a little bit today. At least that's how I feel. Like my brain can't keep up with what I'm trying to say. In other words, my mouth's moving faster than my brain instead of my brain moving faster than my mouth. So there you have it. I love you guys. I hope you have an amazing day. My mom's gonna get ice, so you're totally gonna hear it. Do you have an Instagram? Yes, I do. Oh my God.